Arrival of the Divine. The luminary arrived on a Tuesday. Their ships descended through Earth's atmosphere like falling stars, graceful and terrifying in their silent approach. They didn't come with explosions or immediate destruction, as decades of science fiction had predicted. Instead, they came with gifts and promises. Commander Elena Reyes watched the main view screen in United Earth Defense Headquarters as the luminary ambassador addressed humanity for the third time this week. The alien's form was vaguely humanoid but impossibly perfect, tall and slender with skin that seemed to glow from within, casting prismatic light across its surroundings. Its voice resonated with harmonics that made human speech sound crude by comparison. "We have watched your species struggle through its infancy," the luminary said, its words translated through an interface of their design. "We have seen your wars, your famines, your self-destruction. We offer salvation. We offer guidance. We are the shepherds of developing species across the galaxy. Accept our divine mandate, and Earth will know peace and prosperity beyond your limited imagination." Elena switched off the screen with a sharp gesture. "They're getting bolder with the God complex," she said to the room of military and scientific leaders. "First it was advanced allies, then benevolent guardians, and now divine shepherds. Next week, they'll be demanding temples." Dr. Marcus Chen, head of Tenobiology, adjusted his glasses. "Next week, they've already got them. 17 countries have established communion centers. Brazil just completed one the size of their Christ, the Redeemer statue. And the technology they're offering in exchange for this worship?" Elena asked. "Miraculous," admitted General Hammond, his weathered face grim despite the word choice. "Medical nanites that can cure anything from cancer to aging. Energy systems that make fusion look like rubbing sticks together. Agricultural innovations that could end world hunger within a year. All for the low price of humanity's independence," Elena said, her voice bitter. "Has anyone actually seen a luminary ship's weapon systems yet?" The room fell silent. 5 months since first contact, and despite the luminary's presence in orbit and on Earth's surface, they had never once demonstrated their military capabilities. They didn't need to. Their gifts spoke volumes about the technological gap. Anything that could manipulate matter at the level their medical technology demonstrated could just as easily unmake a human body or an entire city. "They don't need weapons," Dr. Chen said quietly. "They're colonizing us through dependency. Why destroy what will willingly serve?" Elena stood and paced the secure conference room. "Something doesn't add up. If they're as godlike as they claim, why bother with us at all? Gods don't need worship. They don't need permission to reshape a world. What are they really after?" The question hung in the air until an aide rushed in, face pale. "Commander, you need to see this." He activated the view screen, showing aerial footage of what had once been Pyongyang. Where the North Korean capital had stood, there was now only a perfectly circular crater, edges smooth as if cut by a surgeon's scalpel. "When?" Elena demanded. 20 minutes ago. North Korea launched missiles at the luminary vessel over Seoul. This was the response. The aide's voice shook. No radiation, no blast pattern. The city and everyone in it just ceased to exist. "So now we know," General Hammond said quietly. "They do have weapons after all." Within days, most remaining resistance to the luminary collapsed. Nations pledged fealty to the divine ones, establishing communion centers where humans could receive the aliens' gifts and guidance. The luminary representatives, never more than a few hundred on Earth at any time, moved with untouchable authority. Elena's resistance went underground, operating from bunkers designed during the Cold War. What had been Earth's unified defense force fractured into a scattered insurgency, careful to never directly confront the overwhelming technological superiority of their new gods. 3 months into the occupation, Dr. Chen requested an urgent meeting. When Elena arrived at the hidden laboratory, she found him surrounded by dissected luminary technology, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. "I found something," he said without preamble. "They're not gods, Alina. They're not even close." Alina approached the workbench where a small silver device lay partially disassembled. "What am I looking at?" "A luminary medical scanner. I managed to capture one intact." Chen pointed to certain components. "Look at the quantum resonance patterns. Their technology isn't magic. It's just significantly advanced. But here's the thing. It has limitations. Specific frequencies it can't process. Blind spots. Can we exploit that?" Alina asked, hope flickering for the first time in months. Chen's smile was tired but triumphant. "Better. I found evidence that their biology has the same limitations. They're not energy beings or transcended consciousnesses. They're organic with vulnerabilities. And their ship engines. They operate on principles we can understand and potentially disrupt." Alina leaned closer. "You're saying we can fight back?" "I'm saying we can win," Chen corrected. "But we'll need to coordinate globally, hit them simultaneously across all their ships and communion centers. If we strike at just one, they'll simply eradicate another city in retaliation. How much time do you need?" Chen looked at his calculations. 2 weeks to synthesize enough of the disruption agent and distribute it to resistance cells worldwide. The tricky part will be delivery. We'll need people on the inside of every communion center. Alina nodded, already formulating plans. "I'll contact our people in what's left of the Chinese military and the Russian cells. We'll need the Europeans too." "There's one more thing," Chen said hesitantly. "The delivery system requires proximity. The people who deploy this won't survive the initial reaction." Alina met his eyes steadily. "Then we'll ask for volunteers. There won't be a shortage, Marcus. Not after what they did to Pyongyang." As she left the laboratory, Alina looked up at the night sky, where luminary ships hung like new stars, beautiful and terrible. They called themselves gods, but gods didn't have weaknesses. Gods didn't need to demand worship. And gods certainly didn't bleed. But soon, Alina would discover if the luminary could. The fall of false gods. Dawn broke over what remained of free human territory, the sun rising on what could be humanity's last coordinated act of defiance. Alina watched from the command bunker as resistance fighters around the world reported in, their faces grim with determination. Sydney team in position. Lagos ready. Moscow standing by. Rio prepared to move. 43 teams worldwide. Positioned near luminary communion centers or their landing vessels. Each carried Dr. Chen's disruptor. Devices that looked deceptively simple, like silver cylinders no larger than a thermos. Inside each was a quantum resonance emitter calibrated to the exact frequency that Chen had discovered in the luminary technology. Alina took a deep breath. Commence Operation Icarus. Across the world, human resistance fighters approached luminary sites. Some posed as new converts seeking communion. Others used stolen identification to enter as maintenance workers. A few simply rushed security perimeters, willing to die just to get close enough. In New York, former NYPD officer James Wilson joined the line of devotees entering the communion center that had once been St. Patrick's Cathedral. The cylinder was strapped to his chest beneath loose clothing. His hands trembled slightly, but his eyes were steady. 6 months earlier, his daughter had died when medicine was withheld from a hospital that had refused luminary oversight. When he reached the inner sanctum where a luminary presided, golden light emanating from its perfect form, Wilson didn't hesitate. He activated the device and lunged forward. Around the world, similar scenes played out. The attacks weren't simultaneous. They couldn't be, with Earth's communication networks monitored. But they occurred within a 4-hour window, each triggering the next like falling dominoes. In the command bunker, Alina watched the scattered reports coming in. Explosions of light at communion centers. Luminary ships suddenly losing their perfect positioning in orbit, drifting. Communications from the aliens cutting out mid-sentence. "It's working," Chen whispered beside her, watching the sensor readings. The disruption is cascading through their network. Then came the retaliation. The luminary ship over Madrid descended rapidly, its previously invisible weapon systems glowing to life. Elena braced for another Pyongyang, another city erased from existence. Instead, something extraordinary happened. The ship faltered, its lights flickering. It listed to one side before stabilizing, but the weapons never fired. "They're vulnerable," Chen said, voice rising in excitement. "Their ships are connected to the same network as their communion technology. The disruptor is affecting their entire system." Reports flooded in from around the world. Luminary representatives were collapsing, their perfect forms convulsing as the disruption spread. Their skin, once luminescent, turned ashen and dull. Some luminary fled back to their ships, abandoning communion centers entirely. This isn't just affecting their technology, Elena realized. It's affecting them biologically. What are they? Chen, the scientist, was already analyzing new data streaming in from field teams. "If I had to guess, they're cybernetically enhanced organic beings. The technology isn't separate from them. It's integrated into their biology. They've been using quantum fields to maintain their appearance, possibly even their longevity." Elena leaned forward as a new transmission came through. This one from within a luminary vessel. A resistance fighter had managed to board during the confusion. The footage was shaky, but it showed luminary in a state never seen before. Panicked, their movements jerky and uncoordinated. Without their technology functioning properly, they seemed almost frail. "Commander," General Hammond called from another console. "Beijing is reporting that they've captured a luminary alive. Its enhancements are failing. They say it's aging rapidly." Over the next 12 hours, the truth about the Divine Ones emerged. They weren't gods. They weren't even a naturally evolved species anymore. The luminary had originated as biological beings similar to humans, but thousands of years ago, they had begun augmenting themselves with increasingly advanced technology. Their consciousness remained organic, but their bodies were sustained and enhanced by quantum technology that gave them their godlike appearance and abilities. Dr. Chen's disruptor had severed the connection between their biological components and technological enhancements, rendering them vulnerable for the first time in millennia. By the second day, the luminary called for negotiations. Their representative, now appearing as a much more ordinary being with gray skin and visible age lines, met with Elena and a coalition of human leaders. "You were never meant to discover this weakness," the luminary said, its voice now lacking the harmonics that had made it sound divine. "No species has ever managed it before." "How many?" Elena asked. "How many worlds have you conquered with your false divinity?" The luminary's expression was unreadable. 47 developing civilizations currently acknowledge our guidance. Hundreds more have done so throughout our history. And now they'll all learn the truth, Elena said. "We'll make sure of it." The terms of peace were negotiated over weeks. The luminary would withdraw from Earth, taking their communion centers with them. They would provide reparations in the form of technology, but this time without strings attached, without the requirement of worship. Most importantly, they would acknowledge humanity as equals in any future interactions, not as subjects. As the last luminary ship prepared to leave Earth orbit, Elena stood with Dr. Chen, watching the sky. "They'll be back," Chen said quietly. "Not as gods, maybe, but they still have technological advantages. And there are 46 other civilizations out there still under their control." Elena nodded. "Then we better start preparing and reaching out. Those other civilizations deserve to know what we discovered. That their gods can bleed. That no species has the right to demand worship from another," Elena corrected. "And that humanity doesn't kneel, not to tyrants, not to conquerors, and certainly not to false gods." As the luminary ship vanished into the atmosphere, Elena turned away from the sky to face the rebuilding ahead. Humanity had lost cities, had lost millions of people, but had kept something more valuable: its independence. And somewhere out in the galaxy, 46 other worlds were about to learn that their gods weren't divine after all, and that humans had been the ones to prove it.